Actress Demi Moore has been making the rounds to promote her brand new memoir called Inside Out. Now, this candid book shares a lot of the indecent proposals, we'll call them, that her ex-husband Ashton Kutcher made during their marriage. It alleges also that he cheated on her. And in an apparent response to the news, Ashton, who is now married, as you know, to Mila Kunis, they've got 2 little kids, he took to Twitter to say he wanted to post a snarky tweet. Instead, he simply quoted his father saying, "Life's good." Is it fair, though, listen, when a celeb publishes a memoir like this, is it fair, now that he's got a new wife, new life, kids, to kind of air out this dirty laundry? Is that fair?
Well, I mean, I love that we have to center him, right? Like, you know, he has a family now and he has a wife now. Let's think about how it is for him. But he certainly wasn't thinking about how it was for Demi and the 3 children that he was stepfather to at the time of the alleged affair, which ended up on the cover of Us Weekly with the other woman revealing her tryst in a hot tub at the Hard Rock with Ashton Kutcher. Imagine how embarrassing it would have been at the time for Demi Moore to have to go through that. But here's the thing. I feel like we have to really understand her book. What she's telling the story of is herself, her pain, her trauma from childhood to now. And the person who looks the worst in her book is actually Demi herself. She's calling herself out. Here are the terrible things I did because I was in such pain. You know what I did? When I was in my 40s, almost 50, I partied with my adult daughter. I got so high, I overdosed. That's not only embarrassing, but some people might say it's pathetic. And she's putting that on herself and explaining the context of what led her to that moment. And it was failed relationships, it was pain. So it's her story. Is she not entitled to tell her story? I think that she is, and as she says, I'm not here to drag anybody, but if I am, I'm dragging myself the most.
Yeah, we have a Facebook comment from Danuta who says they separated a long time ago. She never said these things then. No one is talking about her anymore, so she's trying desperately to put herself in the spotlight again, or she needs money.
She doesn't need the money.
I don't think that that's necessarily the case, and I think that, I mean, she is somebody who's faded from the spotlight. She faded a long time ago, actually, when she was raising her 3 daughters, and I think she was in the, the headlines again when she reemerged in Charlie's Angels, and then through this very public relationship with Ashton Kutcher. I mean, I'll admit, I totally want to read the book. I am interested in her story.
Based on these little tidbits?
I was a big fan of hers growing up. She's somebody who was she was a powerhouse female in Hollywood.
Jane.
She was G.I. Jane, and I think she is a flawed character.
I've never done my ab crunches the same, by the way.
Right?
Never.
I am intrigued to hear about it, but I'm conflicted because for me, I do think it is a little unfair to the people who she calls out, who cannot defend themselves. And for me, I think it's this question of truth. Like, she has the right to share her own truth. But when it implicates other people, and in fact, recently she talked about how she, in the book, she shares that she had taken the virginity of John Cryer, or basically he lost his virginity the first time they had sex. And he's come out and been like, sorry, actually, I wasn't a virgin when we had sex. So there's some inaccuracies potentially there as well. He wasn't upset. Ashton clearly is, and I think the question you have to ask yourself is like, I personally, if I was sharing my truth and sharing my story, unless I wanted people in my life to potentially never love me again or potentially never be a part of my life again, then maybe I would share that story.
Interesting.
But I think it's quite hurtful to someone like Ashton.
It's such a fine line, isn't it? I'm actually writing right now, and I'm dealing with this. I mean, shoot, I'm no Demi Moore, but I am dealing with this because there's certain people in my life that aren't going to come across as great. But as Lainey says, it's about telling your story, and really sharing your truth. And I think that's the bottom line.
Well, you tell those people in advance. This is the thing
I'm
that I would do.
I'm going to tell these people in advance that I'm writing a book.
Are you going to give them an advance copy?
I would let them know.
But I'm not changing. I'm not changing
your narrative.
No, I'm not changing the narrative, but I'll let them know it's coming.
I think the heads up is good.
I feel like, but isn't that the difference between a memoir and an autobiography? A memoir is really about you sharing an emotional truth. An autobiography is like the chronological, like we all read Michelle Obama's book, and that was an autobiography. It wasn't a memoir sharing about little snippets of her life and trauma and all the things she learned. That is It is a memoir that Demi has written. She's not taking you from day one, the day I was born, I'm Demi. Like, she doesn't do that. She kind of dives in and weaves in and out of very traumatic experiences, highs, the lows. So if you are not entitled to your emotional truth, then, you know, I'll tell you this, Ashton, if you're watching. You know, she was famous enough for you to hook up with and marry, but now her fame, when it's biting you, you know, likey?
Interesting.
Interesting.
You know, Andre Agassi wrote a book called Open, and he talks extensively about his first marriage to Brooke Shields. And it doesn't really paint her in the greatest of lights. He talks about her being, you know, not so self-confident. And he tells a story about her having a picture of Steffi Graf, who would become Andre's second wife, on the fridge, because Steffi Graf's body, the way she looked, her physique, that was goals for Brooke Shields. And so Andre would look at this picture of the woman who would be his second wife later on, and Brooke was like, I want to be like her. Oh. I need to be like her. I need abs like that. And thinks, well, you know, now that he's married to Steffi Graf and they have been married for, how did that make her feel?
Yeah.
Right?
It's
but
tough.
it was just an
Tough.
interesting story. But he put it out there. He talked about a lot of people, his family, his dad, and a lot of people really weren't seen in the best of lights. And he was telling a story.